Good evening and welcome to the May 2nd, 2023 Gilderland Central School District Board of Education meeting. Would you all please silence your cell phones and stand for the pledge? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first on the agenda tonight, we have our high school student rep.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Liu, and I have some updates for you guys. The cultural fair was a great success. The third graders came, and they had a lot of fun. Seniors have committed to schools, and on Monday, we had many seniors sign for sports. We are currently in AP test week, so stress levels are high. This past weekend, we had many students perform in the Suburban Council Music Festival, and looking ahead, NISMA is coming up, as well as many music concerts, and Mayfest for Orchestra, as well as Junior Prom and Senior Ball.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Okay, next on the agenda, we have public comment. I have one public comment in person and one in email. So we'll start with Mr. Robert D. Pasquale.
So I don't think, Robert Pasquale, I don't think it's a surprise why I'm here. This is my third time speaking about recess. So to start off on a personal note, recently my son, who attends Farnsworth, shared with me that his peers are now making a choice at lunchtime, which only lasts 30 minutes, whether to eat lunch or to go out and play. So the fact that these kids are making this choice it should have some type of indication that there just isn't enough time to constructively do both play and have lunch in the 30-minute allotment that they have for their lunchtime. I want to read to you a short study from the Albert Einstein College of New York. A 2009 study from researchers at that college, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, New York, showed that compared to those who have minimal or no recess time, elementary school who have free time during the day receive higher ratings from teachers on their classroom behavior. This story was also published in the Journal of Pediatric Medicine. Again, not to refer to the United Nations, but the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights recognizes the right of all children to play, regarding it as an essential part of their well-being. According to a Stanford University study, school recess offers benefits to students' well-being, and recess is a profoundly important part of the school day. In addition, recess offers opportunities for children to learn and enhance communication skills, negotiation, cooperation, sharing, problem-solving, perseverance, self-control, and conflict resolution. I know for myself, personally, I enjoy my breaks throughout the day of work, and it's very necessary. These kids just don't have it. And having recess indoors where it's not freedom to do what they want, it's more constructive instead of unconstructive play, actually is detrimental on another study. I have many studies here in regards to recess, but I just want there to be recess for these kids, and I think that they should have a right. The CDC states that recess is necessary as it provides the recommended 60 minutes per day of physical activity for children, which helps in reducing sedentary behaviors with TV, computer, video games. The CDC and prevention also states
Mr. D. Pasquale,
Yes.
we reached the 3-minute limit. Could you wrap it up,
Okay,
soon?
sure.
Thank you.
So I've spoken to you guys about this a few times. I haven't heard anything back. I'm hoping that there's a decision whether you not approve or approve offering children recess, but I'm quite surprised that it's not really being offered here in New York in the middle school and in the high schools. It's just not there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have another public comment in person? Okay. You can just say your name at the mic, please. Thank you.
My name is David Dwyer. I live here, and I'm a bus driver. I guess maybe it's, the question is, with the budget that we're doing tonight, and with the taxes that we've had to, I would say, send back to the taxpayers that, like Crossgates and some of the other ones just over the border there, my question is do we have someone that, are basically our own tax person that goes through all the properties to make sure that what the towns are doing is correct, so we don't end up with a $3 or $4 million, basically buyback every year? Because I know at the beginning of the year, the principal has stated that some of the towns, it's been 20 years since they've even done property tax assessments. So at the same time of us doing them, it doesn't really cost a lot, and we can look at to see what's out there, and we can even go to those towns and say, hey, you've got $2 million on the table, you're giving up because you don't want to do this. And that way, at least, for the cost of one person or even two, with all these businesses, it'll save us. Because we know that Crossgates, yes, 30 years ago, it was making a lot of money, but it's going down. And every year, they're going to hit us continuously for a lower and lower rate. And the tax at Guilderland just kind of lets it go. And then we're the ones giving up $3 million from our budget, and they're giving up just a little. And it's not a problem for them, but for us, it's, it's something we actually kind of have to budget as if, and you guys know that in a few years, we're going to have to start buying electric buses. That's a $3 million, instead of a $1 million, that's actually $3 million. I've done the numbers. It's $400,000 a bus. And, we need to kind of, I guess, kind of get our ducks in a row so that we have something. And, I would say we, us as come together and, try to help so that we don't hit the taxpayers over the head, because we're trying. And nobody likes, when they're like, hey, I want $5 million off mine, and you're like, okay. It hurts everybody.
Great, thank you. We have one more public comment, I think, in email, no other in person. Linda, okay. Let me read this public comment. Reads, my name is Bridget Kim, and I have a concern regarding the karaoke club at Westmere Elementary. It's not equitable, it's discriminatory, it's not karaoke, and it's certainly not a club. Why on earth would you need to audition for a karaoke club? Karaoke is entertainment. Clubs are inclusive. More than half were sent home with rejection letters that had their name and the words open at home. There is even a line in my daughter's karaoke club rejection letter that reads, quote, you are unable to be a part of this club at this time, unquote. This doesn't sit well with me to send home with 9, 10, and 11-year-olds. I find this unusual as the number of spots available were dependent upon the number of auditions. If they had 10 spots, they had 10 spots. Why would the number of spots depend on the audition, unless only the favorites were chosen for a later public performance? And this makes sense now as they have a 6:30 p.m. June concert at Westmere and an assembly during the school day. Administration told me this was run by volunteers, yet they have a daytime school assembly that would fall during the volunteer contracted hours. These events are not equitable. Think about the hearing impaired children or those just learning English, trying to memorize lines. The karaoke club is, quote, the best of the best from chorus. Participants must have been in chorus. That eliminates many students from even auditioning for this club. Students were required to solo audition and memorize lines. They were evaluated and rated by 5 or more teachers. My child was discriminated against. My child can't be a part of the assembly. My child can't be a part of the club. My child can't perform in a public school concert. She was denied all these opportunities. I couldn't start a wellness club and choose the 10 fastest runners who audition. That's not wellness, and that's certainly not a club. If they want to have an elite master singers, by all means have that. But please have a karaoke club for kids. I asked the principal in email to define club, and it was left unanswered. A quick Google search will yield the following benefits of karaoke. Stimulates the brain, stress relief, help showing feeling and emotion, improve memory, improve reading, build confidence, socialize, lower blood pressure, elevates endorphins, and so many more. Okay, so I think those are all the public comments. Linda, okay, so first with the school recess, just to address this quickly, that there's nothing to, I think, agree or disagree upon. I think all of us, and anyone can speak up, that I would be in support of finding time to make that possible. I'm not sure how that could work into a school day, but as of right now, I don't think there's anything up in terms of trying to structure the day differently to vote on that. And so I don't know if Dr. Wiles, or if this is something that would be better addressed through PTA. I'm not sure, because it's the school day structure and all the minutes that need to be met.
Well, at the elementary level, we already do have recess built in. When it happens during the day is up to the discretion of the teacher, but it does happen every day. Middle school, it would be a discussion about the middle school schedule, which would be a significant undertaking.
Right. So I think that's something that we could, as we talk about planning for the next year, and obviously we've heard about this several times now, and I'm sure that there are other people in agreement. Did you have a comment, Blanca?
Gesture.
Oh, did you have a comment, Mike?
You do now. I'm just
Blanca
kidding.
says you do, so.
No.
Sorry.
I just think at this point in the school year, we're not anticipating any master schedule changes next year, including recess. There's already times built in the day where our teams can take kids outside to get a breath of fresh air. So we're not anticipating any master schedule changes at this time.
Okay. And so we'll keep this in mind, and we appreciate the comments. And then the second comment about the tax tertiary piece, I don't know if, Andrew, if you could address that a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a very worthy comment, because that is clearly one of the largest pressing issues we face. But it's also one that in a lot of ways is out of our control, because we don't have the power to set valuation for properties. So we can't go out and assess properties. We take the property rolls as they're assessed and use that to determine taxes. So the village or a town does an assessment, they do them semi-regularly, they're updated every year with an equalization rate that attempts to bring them forward to what the property value in the real market would be. But the longer it's been since there's been a revaluation, the more variation there's going to be. But that said, we can't independently assess values. So we can't say, well, actually this property should be worth, $500,000, this one should be worth $200,000, this one should be worth $5 million. We have to use the property rolls as they exist.
It's very frustrating. Oh, go ahead, Blanca.
Yes, it's very frustrating. And we did not have a seat at the table. We never have when it comes to deciding, how much to raise taxes. But I think we've talked about this before publicly. Marie, it would be great if somehow we could position ourselves where we are represented next time, where the school board has somebody there that reviews it and knows what we're going into. A seat at the table would be great.
And the last comment, I think Dr. Wiles, you said you're going to address this about the karaoke club. The only comment I think I have about that is that I guess it's just it's like semantics. When you use the word club, it sounds like anybody can join, so maybe changing the name of that is something to think about.
I think we will maybe refine that to make it clear that it is, typically our clubs are open to everyone. But this activity, as it was advertised to families was an audition-based activity. I know they were going for alliteration and naming it, and so we have to find some maybe different way to characterize it so expectations are appropriate.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the budget hearing, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Van Alstyne.
Excellent. Thank you all. We've, in recent meetings, gone over the budget as we've developed it, talked about things that, initiatives we include, those kinds of elements. Today is really a big picture overview of the finances of the budget. So we won't be going through the middle school class edition, a lot of the new editions that are in the budget, but those are in the newsletter that is being mailed out soon to district residents. But the budget proposal for next year is a $9.88 million year-over-year increase, which is 8.99%, or less than 1% above the inflation rate. It comes with a tax levy increase of 2.66%, which is well under our district-specific tax cap. And for the tax rate for residents in Guilderland, the estimated tax increase is 2.31%. With the budget under the tax cap, it needs 50% plus one voter approval, so it's a simple majority for approval. Were the budget to be over the tax cap, that is the level where you would need 60% of voter approval to pass the budget. In New York State, we break budgets down into three parts, the so-called three-part budget, which are program, capital, and administrative. And I will talk about each of these individually, but point out that 3/4 of next year's budget is devoted to our program. What is the program? That is teacher salaries and benefits, guidance counselors, aides, monitors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, speech therapists. So a lot of staffing that directly serves students. It's the professional development of that staff, related library, media, computer services, but also the transportation, activities, athletics. This is our program. Budget, 75% in next year's budget. It was 77.1% this year. The decline is because of the increase in capital, as we'll get to. The administrative component, this is the salaries and benefits of certified administrators and supervisors, clerical staff, also the activities we do, so information, the printing, research planning, evaluation, data processing, a lot of the legal services outside of tax certiorari, tax collection, school board costs. Slight decline in percentage this year, so this makes up 11% of next year's budget. And finally, the capital component, a couple percentage point increase for next year because of large investments in debt service on buildings as part of the capital project. School bus purchases, those are more, for us, steady. But the tax certiorari claims that were brought up, this is a big part of why this budget component is increased for next year. Our revenue, large jump in state aid. The budget, a month and a day late, the state's finally adopting the budget. The education bill passed tonight, so that's the one that fully funds foundation aid. So next year, for the first time, the district will receive its full foundation aid amount. So that's behind the roughly $8 million increase year over year. There's also an increase in local revenues, interfund transfers, mostly because interest rates have been more favorable for money that we have being held. And a big note for next year's budget is a decrease in appropriated reserves and zero appropriated fund balance. So that is, we are keeping to our planned schedule of reserve usage, but we're not dipping into fund balance like we had to in the current year. And then the tax levy, again, is 2.66% increase year over year. So what does it look like? 2/3 of district funding comes from property taxes for next year. That is a slightly smaller share than in the current year because of, again, the increase in state aid, which is going to be 31.5% of our revenue projection for next year. Now, if we look at the expenditures in terms of what they're going to, 77.6% go to salaries and benefits. So this is across the board. So every employee and employee benefit is in the salaries and benefits component. The $2.08 million levy increase is a 2.66% increase with a 2.31% tax increase. This is the calculation of the property tax cap, which we've been going over for the last few months. The general idea, and I won't walk through all the components tonight, is that the district has some spend, has last year's levy, and that can increase by a set percent. And then there's also additional spending that is exempt from the tax cap. So that for us, that is things like capital project borrowing. That is not included in the tax cap calculation. So that is why the 2% tax cap is often not 2%. So in our case, it comes out to be 2.96%. And so we are 0.3% below our tax cap limit. In other words, it's $231,000 below what the maximum allowable levy increase would be for next year. All of our budgets in the tax cap era have been at or below the tax cap, so have only required the simple majority approval. And we can see over the last 6 years, between 65% and 75% roughly of voters have voted to adopt the budgets. So they've been passing by a significant margin. And we see here our levy increases and tax levy limits have been fairly close. So in some years we need to go to the cap, and in some years we are slightly below the cap. Were the budget to not pass in 2 weeks, the district could have two choices. They could propose a second budget, and there would be a vote in June, or they could adopt a contingency budget. If the budget were being held in June and the budget was defeated then we would have to adopt a contingency budget. A contingency budget limits the amount of money that can be spent on quote-unquote non-contingent expenses. We have to remove those. We cannot increase the share of spending that goes to administrative costs. That's why we have that three-part budget calculation. And we would have to keep the levy flat. So if our budget were to be defeated in 2 weeks, and either we chose to adopt a contingency budget or we put up another budget that were defeated again the following month, we would have to adopt a contingency budget that would reduce spending by $2.08 million. In addition to the budget proposition, which is the general fund budget for next year, we have a bus and vehicle proposition. This is authorizing bonding to borrow for buses. These are conventional diesel buses and a few other utility vehicles. We're not investing in electric buses yet, although, as our commenter earlier alluded to, there is a state mandate that will go into effect in a few years. And we have 3 candidates vying for 3 open seats. Their names, as they will appear on the ballot, are in order are Kimberly Blasiak, Rebecca Blutterfield, and Judy Slack. For the vote, again, 2 weeks from today, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The votes are held at our 5 elementary schools, and you can visit the website to find out your specific attendance or your voting zone. Questions about the budget? Yes.
This is more about the state budget, but what was determined about the tutoring, high-impact tutoring?
The high impact set aside did not make it into the final budget. We're still reviewing what ended up in there because the language, quote unquote big ugly, which is the bill that has all the policy in it, is less than 24 hours old. But some notable things are No change to the the ability to use slots of UPK, which is one of the things we were hoping for. No free or universal meals that would affect us. But to the good side, the high impact group says I did not make it. Any other?
Updates on the busing, replacing and moving to electric busing?
No, the only addition this year is we have to do a report that I believe will be due 2 years from now. So next year we do the report this following year where we'd be assessing capacity and then what we've done.
I'm also really concerned about it. I agree with Mr. Dwyer.
To do the busing, but when Pat Fahey was here, were they talking about trying to push that deadline out of when everything would have to be changed over to electric?
Yeah, one of a couple of the big questions with this are, when do you have to implement it? Are there going to be exceptions? And is there going to be a movement? Because there's in the law, a point at which you can start buying them, and a point at which you have to have completely turned over your fleet, and you can only transport students with zero-emission vehicles. Those are both set in law at this moment without very significant exceptions. So the final deadline is still pretty rigid. The question we don't know is what the level of state support will be when we're talking about this, because as the commentator alluded to, right now electric buses are about 4 times the cost of a diesel bus. The market fluctuates, but that's approximately where we're at.
Thank you, Andrew. Next on the agenda, we have a program report, curriculum and instruction. I'll turn this over to Rachel.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me some time tonight to talk with you a little bit about the programs and initiatives that Curriculum Instruction has been working on this year. I'm going to highlight 5 different areas for you tonight. The first is state assessment data, our curriculum initiatives across our curriculum cabinets, our federal grants management, universal kindergarten or UPK, and our professional development. So we'll start with some state assessment data. To kind of preset you, when we look at some of the graphs of data that I'm going to put up here, there's some background information that you may or may not be aware of. So the data I will show is from 2018 to 2022, but there's some important caveats. One is that in the 2020 year, there were no state assessments, so you will not see any data for 2020. And then in 2021, there were some assessments. They were limited, held to the 3 through 8 level for the most part, and were mostly questions that had already been released in previous year's tests and were shortened versions of the tests. So that data, we can look at it, but it may not really be truly comparable to the data from the prior years. And then last year in 2022, we did return to full testing, but there were opportunities for students to opt out. And both in 2021 and 2022, some families took what was called an appeal score instead of the regular Regents score for Regents exams. And many students had exemptions from the state exams, especially the Regents exams in 2021. So this year is the first year that we're returning to full testing. We do still have the special appeal for Regents exams, although we expect that to be relatively minimal this year. The issue, however, is that our 3 through 8 tests are now on the new next generation standards. So the standards that we're testing for this year are not the same standards that were tested for from 18 to 22. So really, we have to think about those limitations when we're looking at this data, and we have to remember that the first really year-to-year comparable data is going to be this year, 2023, to next year, 2024, when we'll have full testing on the same set of standards. So, all of that being said, We'll show you what we have found, and I want to take a moment to plug too that all of these graphs that you're seeing tonight, all this data, came directly from Tableau, which is the new system that we are putting in place to help us interpret some of our testing data. So I'm going to start with our grade 4. I am not going to walk through every single testing data because it would take all night. So I picked kind of a sample across the board. This is grade 4 ELA. So what you see in these graphs is that this side over here is Guilderland. This side over here is all public schools in New York State. And what you are seeing is a comparison year to year. So this is the total number of students tested is this number here. Percent proficient is here. What's considered proficient is a level 3 or 4 represented by the light and darker green on the screen. Level 2s are yellow and level 1s are red. So you can get kind of an idea of where we fell percentage-wise. So for grade 4 ELA, some things that I wanted to highlight, and this is relatively representative across the data from all the tests, is that for the most part, our data is either in line with or exceeds the state data. And I will point out one area where that may not be the case, but for the most part, so if we see in 2022 proficiency level of 47%, but if you look at the state proficiency level, it was 42%. So they're either exceeding or in line. The other thing that we are tending to see in this data is that we did have a little bit of a dip in proficiency level from, if you look pre-pandemic, so 2018, 2019 to then 2022. What we are seeing quite a bit across the data is that if you look at the 2021 scores, there's an increase in proficiency rate, but you have to remember that those were the re-released tests. So those are questions students may have seen before, and they were shortened versions of the assessments. So that's pretty representative of what we see when we look at our 3 through 8 data. Here is grade 7 math. Again, something to point out is if you look at the number of students tested in 2021, we see that it is far less than in the other cohorts. So again, we're seeing a dip in that participation level in 2021 as well. Again, for this, we're seeing the same sort of thing. We're seeing that we have a bit of a dip between proficiency levels in 2022 as compared to pre-pandemic, but that across the board we are in line with the state. So when we look at Regents, same basic format, but you'll notice there is a darker green bar at the top. There are 5 levels of proficiency. In Regents exams, that 5th level is mastery, so you'll see that there's 3 levels of green, so a student is considered proficient if they get a 5, a 4, or a 3. Again, we'll see high levels of proficiency in ELA Regents, which is wonderful, and we actually saw an increase post-pandemic to pre-pandemic. But again, in 2021, where we have the highest proficiency level, take a look at that. Number of students tested is 93 as compared to in the upper 300s. So again, when we see a smaller N number or smaller number of students tested, we see that variations among students can have a greater effect on the overall data. So just, again, something to keep in mind. Again, same kind of thing we're seeing in the Algebra 1 Regents results. Again, we are pretty in line or even greater proficiency levels than the state. So we're in pretty good standing when we take a look at comparing ourselves to the state data. So I'm going to jump back to grade 4 ELA for a minute just to refresh your memories of what that looked like, because since grade 4 ELA was relatively representative of what we saw across 3 through 8 testing data, I chose grade 4 to break out for you a little bit and disaggregate, into some of the subgroups. So the subgroups that I'm going to show you are subgroups that are identified as by the state, and that they're used to measure our overall growth and performance and used in our accountability measures. So when you hear about ESSA accountability, these are the subgroups that are identified in that. So when we start to disaggregate the data, if we look at our subgroup of students with disabilities, the first thing I want to point out is, again, when we disaggregate the data, when we looked at the grade board data overall, we see that we have, again, between in the upper 200s to mid 300s students tested, but when we look at our subcategories, that number falls significantly. So when we're looking at these categories, we're now looking at 30 to 40 students. So again, changes in individual student scores will have a greater impact over on the entire data set. Again, what we're seeing is that we are exceeding proficiency levels from the state, but what we have a little bit of a dip from 2019 to 2020. But notice, and this is interesting and again speaks to what happens when you have that lower end number, we actually have an increase in proficiency when you compare 2018 to 2022. So it's just a little interesting fact there. And again, this higher proficiency in 2021 is most likely due to the fact that we saw those questions previously, so students had experience with those questions. When we look at our economically disadvantaged subgroup, again, we have a smaller number of students tested, between 49 and 57 students, depending on the year. And again, we're seeing those same patterns. Our Asian and Pacific Islander subgroup is actually relatively in line with the overall data. So this is really the most comparable subgroup to our overall student performance. But again, we're seeing a lower number of individual students tested. Our Black or African American subgroup, again, small numbers, so we're seeing 9 to 18 in this particular subgroup for this particular exam, which again, individual student differences will impact the data overall, but we are seeing that our proficiency levels have actually increased post-pandemic. And then our Hispanic or Latinx subgroup, again, small numbers, and we are seeing that there can be some individual year-to-year variations, and we did see a dip in proficiency. So, and then this one's a little odd, so bear with me on this one. You'll notice there's 3 years represented instead of 4. That's because they changed the name of the subgroup, and so it populates in a different category. So this is 18, 19, and 21, and there's 22. So you have to sort of look at both slides. Unfortunately, there wasn't an easy way to get those all in the same comparison group because they changed the name of the subgroup. But again, a small number of students, so 13 tested in 2022. Highest number was 17 in 2018. And again, whether it's due to the particular cohort and the individual students, we actually saw an increase in proficiency level post-pandemic. So what are our takeaways from all of that? And I know I raced through that, so apologies. I'll be sure to clarify if anyone has questions later. But what are the takeaways? Well, our proficiency rates are meeting or exceeding New York State averages, which is good news. And in some areas, we've seen a dip in proficiency rate, particularly when we're comparing pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and also particularly when we look at some of our subgroups, when we disaggregate the data. But in many other areas, we're seeing that we've maintained proficiency or come very close to maintaining proficiency from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. This data does show us, though, some areas of focus and growth, particularly making sure that we're aligned to the standards that will start being measured in the 2023 cycle. So making sure that our curriculum is aligned to the next generation learning standards. Taking a look at our teaching practices, making sure that we are engaging students from all of our diverse backgrounds and all of our subgroups, employing some inclusivity and some culturally responsive teaching methods. And finally, making sure that we are continuing to look at this data and using tools like the Tableau tool to really dig into what some of this data means. What I showed you is the very surface data, and what we can do then is dig deeper and deeper and get down to even a question analysis or an answer choice analysis. So this will be usable for teachers and making sure that we're helping teachers make use of this when they're planning their instruction. So we are trying to, with our initiatives in our curriculum cabinet, start to address some of those points that I just highlighted to you. So I'm going to take this cabinet by cabinet. Language arts cabinet. Oh, sorry. No, it's okay.
Now about
Do you,
this
take
topic.
a few minutes if you want.
Is that okay? Just
Sure.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
We'll go back.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So slide 11, our economically disadvantaged subgroup in 2022. There's a big dip. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think, again, we have to take a look at the end number, and so it's really hard to compare year to year. So if you're looking at the dip from 21 to 22, I don't know that that's really comparable because of the fact that those were shorter tests and pre-released questions. So what I've been doing when looking at this data is comparing that 2022 number to 2018 and 2019. So we are still seeing a dip. And yes, that's something I think we need to dig into. It's definitely an area of concern. I don't know that I'm ready to say I have an explanation for that yet. I don't think we've dug deep enough, but it's definitely something that we are keeping an eye on and trying to, we'll be looking at this year's data, does that trend continue, or was that an anomaly?
I had the same question on the same graph. So, because that was the one that stood out the most, that's significantly different. So then after, we know that, then what do we, I guess what changes happen based on that, like going forward?
So this is the overall district data. So each building, we can disaggregate this by building as well. So we would look to see if there are trends within buildings, and then to see, look at an item analysis. Are there portions of the data that are showing us that students who are in this subgroup are disproportionately getting questions wrong? And then we can actually look at those questions and see what standard does that question align to. What are the answer choices associated with that question? What are there distractors that may have been more appealing to that subgroup for whatever reason than others? Are there deficiencies in particular standards for particular subgroups that we want to make sure that we're addressing? So those are the sorts of things that we would look for, and we look to see if there were patterns between schools, patterns between grade levels. And again, this is one test at one grade level, 1 year. So while it's representative, it's not, I wouldn't say it's the be-all, end-all of this particular subgroup's data. We would have to dig quite a bit deeper.
I have a quick, just one real quick. It's like what pointed out to me on this standard was that it looks like everybody went down, all public schools went down 21 to 22 by 17%, but we went down by 30%. Like that was the big thing that stuck out to me. So it's like we're above the standard most of the line most of the time of other public schools, but in this one in particular, it's significantly down. So I would be interested in why for that one as we look into the data. I'm sure that might be the case in other things, but just particularly significant here.
Absolutely, and I think another thing to think about when we're looking at subgroups, there's a reason that some of our funds, our federal funds, which I'm going to get to a little bit later, are targeted for populations that were disproportionately affected by COVID. And I would think that this particular subgroup is one that we might put in that category. Does that fully explain these results? I would say it's too soon to give that answer, but that's another thing we might want to look at. So definitely as we start to dig into this, we come up with more and more and more questions, which is part of the nature of looking at the data, and why we want to look at trends and overall trends as opposed to putting too much stock in one particular data set. But I do agree, these are definitely areas that we want to be looking at.
Yeah.
So we're looking at just the achievement data. There's other data that we will also need to be looking at to see if there's, what's the why behind that big yellow bar there?
What percentage of our students opt out? And do you think that skews the data in any way?
That's hard. I wish I could give you data for this year, but the testing is still taking place currently. I know that we had a low percentage of opt-outs ahead of time, but reports I'm hearing from the principals is that there were day of and week of opt-outs that we don't have a handle on yet. I don't know that I'd want to do a comparison for the last few years in opt-outs because we know we've had far more than we had in the past. Do you know off the top of your head what it was in 18 or 19 by any chance?
That would be good. I don't. I think it varied a lot by building. So I think it'd be something we would need to look at. And students opt out for lots of different reasons. So whether or not that in any given building would affect the overall result is really a good question to ask, but I don't know off the top of my head.
And I could see it skewing our data, some of our subgroups that have such a small ed number to begin with. If we saw opt-outs in those categories, I could see that skewing the data more. But again, we need to ask more questions.
Or last week, an article about testing didn't mention Gilderland, but mentioned other capital districts, and about how there's no time limit on these tests. And some of the students were taking them for like 3 hours or something, interrupting their lunch period or their PE period. Do we experience that at all? Or?
In pockets, yes. I mean, so there's pros and cons to taking off the time limit. I can tell you that feedback across the state is about to state ed will be how long it did take some of our students to complete that exam and whether or not that helps us get an accurate picture of their ability if they're taking all day to take an exam. So that, I'm hearing that as well from different districts, and I know that feedback is going to be state. Any other questions on the data piece? If you have more at the end, that's okay. Okay, so back to our curriculum initiatives, and I'm going to speak a little bit just how we're going to, or how our plan to address some of those questions and some of those areas of concern as we go forward with some of our curriculum cabinet initiatives. So language arts cabinet, these are from the goals of the cabinet for this school year for 22-23. Goals were to align instruction to the next gen learning standards, to increase and expand the word study program that started a couple of years ago in the elementary level, and to support our literacy coaching initiative, which next year every building will have a 1.0 FTE literacy coach, who will divide their time half-time in the primary grades of K through 2 and half-time in the intermediate grades of 3 to 5. Coaching, we have been sticking with the coaching model because it really has shown some good results in the elementary school. We have been able to get a number of our teachers through a coaching cohort. They have very intensive job-embedded professional development around literacy instruction and literacy interventions. And so we do plan to support and continue that program. Language arts, right now, I'm going to again put a little caveat on this. I do have summer work goals for Language Arts Cabinet only because they met last week and already developed them. So the other cabinets, it's not that they don't have them, it's that we haven't completely pinpointed them yet and we're not really ready to share out. But Language Arts Cabinet has developed a focus for summer 2023. And the focus is to provide an articulated curriculum roadmap for reading and writing in grades K-5. That's very ambitious, so I do not believe we will complete that or even come up with a full K-5 draft in one summer, but we are going to start working on a curriculum roadmap that is aligned to the next gen standards, and also layered on top of that, looking at our interventions for students who are not meeting those 3 and 4 proficient levels. And so those tiered intervention approaches will also include some work in phonemic awareness, word study, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. So we're making sure we're thinking about all 5 of those categories when implementing these interventions. Math cabinet spent a lot of time in 22-23. Again, examining the priority standards that are aligned to the next generation learning standards. Math Cabinet has been doing that for the last couple of years. The main focus this year was to make sure that the benchmarked assessments that are given in grades 1 through 5 were really aligned to those next gen standards. And revamping some of those benchmarked assessments so that we make sure that they are giving us the best information possible on how our students are progressing towards standards mastery throughout the year, so that we're not just testing them at the end of the year, but we're able to check their progress throughout the year. There's also been work done on progress monitoring for our students who require Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions in math, and work on how to make sure that the math specialists are able to best provide those tiered interventions for those students. And again, providing professional development is the role of all the cabinets. And in Math Cabinet, we're really focusing on Tier 1 and 2 interventions that classroom teachers can put in place, and working more on teachers using mathematical discourse and teaching the math practices which are aligned with those next-gen standards. Science Cabinet is in a bit of a unique position because we have new requirements for grades 3 through 8 science, which are the new state-required science investigations. I will tell you, we did not even get a draft of these until mid-school year this year, so we've been working pretty frantically to try to familiarize ourselves with them, order all of the materials we need to perform the investigations, and start training teachers in how to go through the investigations with the students. So to give you a little bit of background, starting next year in 2024, there will be 2 science tests, state science tests in grades 3 through 8, one at grade 5 and one at grade 8. And prior to taking those assessments, students will have to have completed 4 investigations at each level. So they'll have 4 investigations to complete in elementary school and 4 investigations to complete in middle school. And we are trying to spread those out so that they're not all clustered in the end of 5th grade and the end of 8th grade, but that those investigations are being accomplished at a time that makes sense with our curriculum spiral. So when they're learning about life science, they're completing the investigation in life science, even if that's not in 5th grade. Again, focusing on the new New York State Science Learning Standards, or the NISLIS, and making sure that our curriculum is aligned, and also developing those priority standards in each grade level and determining what students need to move from one grade level to the next and be successful. Social studies, again, this is going to sound familiar. We are looking at the social studies framework, which is part of the new next generation standards, and determining those priority standards K-12. We have done quite a bit of work in the social studies cabinet the last 3 months on the K through 8 standards, with a plan to develop some tools this summer that teachers can implement immediately. So some toolkits for teachers to use that will align with those social studies practices in the framework. And as another goal is layered again on top of that is making sure that while we're providing these toolkits, we're also keeping an eye on the DEI goals and incorporating DEI strategies and culturally responsive teaching methods in that content. Our other cabinets are working, again, everyone is working to align to new standards because all the new standards have rolled out within the past 4 years, so it's a continuous process. Some highlights: art is also working on the individual arts assessment pathway for grades 9 through 12, which is a brand new initiative from the state. And Shannon Elliott has been working with the high school teachers to complete our application, which we hope to submit very soon, actually. Also, our CTE program is working on program reapproval. So we do have an approved business CTE pathway, and we are looking to make that pathway more robust and to recertify it. And I know that, again, Dr. Elliott has been working with the teachers to make sure that their practices are supporting our DEI initiatives. Music has spent some time this year aligning K-12, which is wonderful. Typically, they have not had a lot of time to work together as a whole K-12 continuum in the music department. So I've been working with Bob Winans to make sure that we're providing as much time as we can for that to happen, and that's going to be a continued effort. Same for physical education and health. We're making sure that we are looking with a K-12 perspective. And some of the elementary PE teachers have made it a priority to collaborate outside of contractual hours, so we're doing a lot more collaborating for them to try to align their instruction. And finally, world language. As you know, Marcia Ranieri was here a few months ago to talk about Seal of Biliteracy, and so we're still exploring the Seal of Biliteracy through state ed. Yes.
The science standards, with all the changes happening, I'm just wondering, who works with the elementary school, the elementary teachers with all these changes?
So every elementary school has a science teacher leader who sits on the science cabinet and has been well-versed in the changes as they're coming out. Again, this year has been a little bit tricky because the changes were coming out mid-year and we were doing our best to keep up. We also do have a science instructional coach through Capital Region BOCES, who we are paying for with the ESSER grant. She's part of the ESSER grants and our ESSER for next year. So she has been helping us with professional development for elementary teachers. Our November conference day had a 2-hour session explicitly for those science investigations for teachers in grades 3 through 5. So we're trying to make sure that we are providing as much professional development as possible, even though we're all kind of learning as we go at this point.
I was going to say, because those teachers that are on the, or the teacher leaders, I mean, they're teaching a full load, right? So I'm just wondering how they stay on top of, or how they stay well-versed, like you said, in the changes.
It's definitely a challenge. I will say that we did this fall have a professional development series that was designed by the teacher leaders and held in conjunction with our science coach, and we plan to do something similar next fall to make sure that we're providing that continuous professional development, but it definitely is a challenge. And I think particularly with the nature of science investigations, until you run through them a couple of times, I don't think anyone will really truly feel comfortable with them. So we are trying to get extra bodies in the classroom when teachers run through these. Lisa Sicoscio, who's our science coach, has sat in with a few people as they've run the investigations the first time, and we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that that happens. We get that support.
You just mentioned the Seal of Biliteracy. Where are we with that?
Actually, I don't know that we have an update from.
Marcia presented the plan, so I think she's having an informational session later in the school year, which is soon, but the plan is to implement it next fall.
Okay, so students who graduate next year or the year after will have the opportunity.
I believe that I believe it's students next year.
I do too, but I'm not 100%. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so another huge project we've been working on is federal grants. As you probably know, the title funding is run through curriculum and instruction, and so this is just some highlights of how we used our title funding this year, and we're in planning stages for next year. So this year, our Title I funding helped us to provide literacy coaches at Altamont, Guilderland, and Westmere elementary schools. We also were able to provide a portion of the salary for a social worker who had a focus on supporting our homeless students. We were able to fund an additional TA at Guilderland Elementary School and provide some supports, some professional development supports for literacy interventions and the purchase of some of those literacy materials. Title II was, again, to provide support for professional learning for tiered literacy interventions. And also that was used to support 18 stipends for our teacher leaders and our technology liaisons at the Title I schools, so Altamont, Guilderland, and Westmere Elementary. Title IV, we used the funds this year from Title IV to support our work with Progression Partners and our equity teams. As you probably also know, our CRISA funding, or ESSER2 and Year 2 funding, sunsets this coming September. So most of what I'm going to tell you are funds that have already been spent. The exception to that is the summer programs that we're using this money to fund. So we're using this money to fund some of our summer curriculum projects and to help support some of our summer initiatives. These funds were also used to support the high school PM school stipends, K-12 social workers and counselors, our K-12 floating nurse, some K-5 special education teachers, the science coach I spoke to a moment ago, and some additional academic supports in math, reading, and world languages for students, particularly at the elementary and middle school levels, and TAs to support special education students and English language learners. We were also able to purchase some classroom technology, notably Promethean boards for many of the classrooms in the district. We also were able to get ourselves started with a cycle of replacement of Chromebooks for students and teachers so that we were able to make a mass purchase we wouldn't have otherwise been able to make. And we used quite a bit of the ESSER2 funds to purchase software and renew software that we implemented during the closure and the remote learning year. So many of our teachers liked some of the programs that we were able to purchase at that point, and so we're trying to find a way to work those into our budget long term, but in the meantime, they're being covered by these grants. We were also able to use some of this money to fund one-time purchases of equipment and supplies that we could use. So some of the items that we were able to purchase were some additional musical instruments and some science equipment, kilns for our elementary school art programs, athletic equipment for high school and middle school, some STEM equipment for our high school and middle school, notably microscopes, calculators, and some larger ticket items for our technology shop. Elementary science kits, we were able to expand our science kits, some digital cameras for the art program, sewing machines for our FACS program, and some additional instructional materials for both literacy and math at the K-5 level. And quite a big chunk of our CRISA funds are going to our outdoor instructional spaces, our pavilions. There will be one of those at each building. Also, quite a sizable amount of money went to some HVAC work at Guilderland High School and to improve our sanitation. And we also were able to purchase some furnishings for instructional spaces and some cleaning and sanitation equipment for the district. So ARP ESSER funds are funds that are planned use for the next school year for 23-24. These funds sunset in September of 2024. Again, this is going to sound very familiar because a lot of this was discussed in our budget development. So for personnel, our DEI teacher on special assignment will come from these funds, as will our K-5 social worker and speech pathologist, our K-12 floating nurse again, a K-5 special education teacher, K-5 ENL teacher, our science instructional coach, some of our literacy coaches who are not covered by the other funds already mentioned, an additional reading teacher, and some TAs to support our special education students, as well as some of our teacher leader stipends and summer work for Positivity Project and Focus, and finally some additional professional development for our literacy interventionists. Equipment and supplies, some of these have already been purchased, many are in the plan to be purchased. The kits and supplies for the science investigations, as we previously discussed, raised beds for our school garden to make them more accessible for some of our students with disabilities, some screening and progress monitoring tools for our UPK program and for our kindergarten students and grade 1 students, some handwriting intervention programs for our students in grades kindergarten and first, and some additional resources for literacy instruction, and new but not up there yet is some additional resources for our math interventionists. And then finally, the remainder of those funds will go towards our outdoor instructional spaces. Questions on any of that?
actually, and I think I probably speak for a lot of us here. I think it's great we're using these federal funds, but we brought this up before with the budget talks. I'm just concerned about our ability to sustain them for the 24 and 25 budget going forward, particularly the instructional components and the social emotional supports. Just my 2 cents.
Any other questions about grant funding? So UPK, or Universal Pre-Kindergarten, is another large project for curriculum and instruction. Just a little bit of an update of some of the new features that of our UPK program for 22-23, and then where we're looking and where we're going for 23-24. In 22-23, we were able to put into place uniform screening and progress monitoring for all 4 of our community-based sites. So they're all using the same screener and the same progress monitoring tools, and the same reports are going home to parents. And we will retain copies of those within the district, so that then when the students move into kindergarten, we can send those records with those students. So the hope there is, and by the way, that is consistent with the screener that we'll be using at kindergarten. So the idea is that we can have progress monitoring that follows students from UPK through grade 1. We're also able to implement this year universal screening of all UPK students for any kind of ENL needs, and we are in the process of providing vision and hearing screening for all of our sites with the help of our floating nurse, and that program will be continued into 23-24. So for 23-24, we are in the process of getting our contracts finalized with all 4 of our sites. We do plan to continue with all 4 of the sites that we currently have a relationship with. We anticipate approximately 92 UPK seats for next year. We are unfortunately limited by the number of students that our cooperating sites are able to take. So as Andrew alluded to, we have some limitations, and we are not able to offer the number of seats that we are allotted, but we are working hard with our community-based organizations to maximize the opportunities that we have at those sites. Oh, I could look it up for you in about.
Is it
as soon as I sit down.
significantly over 92
significantly
or
over.
less than that, which is what we have?
I want to say it's about 180.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So that is it is a limitation of our program. Yeah. Registration did end on April 6th. We are required by the state to do a completely random lottery. We are in the process of completing that random lottery with the goal of notifying families as soon as we possibly can. So, but that is as you can imagine, a process. Any questions on UPK?
Actually, a question for Dr. Wiles about UPK. So at a meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago, you had mentioned potentially for the future pooling resources among districts. Has there been any more mention of that?
Not a ton. It's still, I think, a topic of conversation. I think we had a lot of hope that in this legislative process there would be other kinds of movement. For example, increasing the per pupil allocation that would make this more attractive to our local partners to open up more seats to us. That didn't materialize. There was also a real push to consolidate other funding streams because as complicated as our picture seems, it's much easier than some of our neighbors. So now that we're status quo, I do think we need to go back to that conversation and see if there is the possibility for doing some collaborative as opposed to competitive placements. The other thing is that this budget that the state just passed opened the door for capital construction aid on pre-K building. Not that I'm suggesting we build something, but collaboratively across, there may be some opportunities there. So that is going to be back on the list because we're going to just run out of space.
Any other UPK questions? Final thing, I promise. our professional learning update. So as I mentioned earlier, our most recent conference day was March 17th. And it was really a labor of love between HR and DEI and curriculum and instruction. And we were able to provide through collaborative efforts learning opportunities for the majority of our faculty and staff, including teachers, teaching assistants, nurses, aide monitors, and clerical staff. And we are trying to be as mindful as possible of including as many groups of faculty and staff as possible when we're planning these days. So the schedule for the day, if you're interested, there's a link to the schedule. It's all hyperlinked, so feel free to explore as you wish. There was time set aside in the morning for K-12 department work as well as secondary departments, and the elementaries at that point in time used that time for science professional development for classroom teachers, and then the reading specialists also engaged in some literacy professional development during the morning. And the afternoon was devoted to building time. In the middle of the day, we had our equity teams present the equity plans that they had been developing since this past summer. And then in the afternoon, again, it was building time, and most buildings had workshops that teachers could choose from that were provided by their peers or by content experts that we had in-house. So we did collect some data from all of our faculty groups, and our instructional technology specialists helped me make that look simplified and pretty for you. So again, there's a link to that data if you're interested in taking a look. I will say that the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People really liked the structure of the day. They liked having time to work with their departments. They liked having some choice and some self-directed professional development. And our plan is to continue to use that model for at least one of our superintendent's conference days each year to provide that structure that teachers really enjoy. We're also in the process of restructuring our professional learning cabinet to have a little bit more representation from different stakeholder groups, to have some representation from some of those groups that I mentioned before, monitors, clerical. So traditionally that group has been majority teachers and administrators. We'd like to broaden that group a little bit. And also to increase the influence they have over the planning of our district-wide professional development and helping the buildings align their goals to the district goals. So the goal is to have representation from each building on the district cabinet to make sure that we're keeping those lines of communication open. We did, as a professional learning cabinet, put out a needs assessment survey in February, and so the results of that, again, with all thanks to Rachel Picheri, our instructional technology specialist, she created a dashboard where you can look at those results, and if you're interested, you can sort by building and by level, which is pretty interesting because the needs do change pretty significantly when you start looking at different levels of instruction. Finally, we are planning to hold a GEMS steering committee meeting. Regan and I will be meeting with a few of the representatives from from GEMS to foster some more collaborative work between GEMS, the professional learning cabinet, and our departments to make sure that we are aligning our professional development opportunities for our newest faculty members. And that is it. Any questions on professional learning, professional development? Siva?
The mentoring program, right, for the new
Yes.
teachers?
Yes.
And I may have missed this, but I thought maybe you said that at some point, like during the year, you worked with the reading teachers, and there was all this, I guess, these changes being made with reading instruction.
So we are looking at our literacy instruction overall as a language arts cabinet. I wouldn't say there's changes being made in literacy instruction. I think we're just re-examining what our current practice is and making sure that it's aligning to the new standards, making sure that we have some of those priority standards for each grade level, and really focusing on what are the skills that students need to be successful moving from one level to the next. So creating that that roadmap, for lack of a better term, is really what the focus is going to be this summer. So we haven't, I wouldn't say we've implemented any changes per se, but that's where we're looking to move. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rachel. Next on the agenda, yep, we have the consent items. This includes the minutes from the April 4th meeting, the April 19th meeting, CPSE and CSE recommendations. Let me slide this down. Large personnel agenda, financials, and the financials also includes the claims auditor reports. This time, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Blanca, second. Nate. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Passes 8-0. Next on the agenda, we have information items and superintendent information. Dr. Wiles?
My first item today is to make note that 1 week, or next week on May 10th, is actually National School Nurse Day. It's been set aside since 1972 to recognize school nurses, and it was established to foster a better understanding of the role of school nurses in the educational setting. We've learned that very much so over recent years. This year, the theme is You Make a Difference. We honor school nurses' varied roles, as well as the positive impact they have on everyone's lives. So we want to extend an early thank you to all of our school nurses who daily go above and beyond to keep our students and staff healthy, safe, and ready to learn and grow. So we're very appreciative of that. And my second item today is also about appreciation. Today actually is National Teacher Appreciation Day, and next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. So I think we look at the month of May as a time to really say thank you to our teachers who have weathered the better part of the school year and so make such a difference. I mean, obviously, we could not do what we do without the efforts and the commitment of our teachers who every single day connect with our students, creatively come up with activities, and just really touch the lives of each and every student. I have a plaque on my desk that says, teaching is the source of all professions. And it's true that without a teacher, we wouldn't have any other expertise, any other profession in the world. So my thanks to our teachers in Guilderland, but truly to all teachers everywhere. It's a great profession, and we're thankful for them.
Thank you, Dr. Wiles. Next, we have board president information. I have 3 items. The first is the voter registration. So the board, the school budget and board of election vote will be on Tuesday, May 16th. You're required to be registered to vote in this district. You need to be 18, a citizen, and a resident of Guilderland 30 days prior to the vote. And you can register to vote either through the Albany County Board of Elections or through the school district. The district has 3 registration dates to vote. The dates are May 4th, May 8th, and May 9th. And the times are from 8:30 to 2:30 at any of the elementary schools, are from 8:30 to 4:30 at the district office. And if you're not sure which elementary school to vote at, you can go to the school district website and find budget and taxes, and then voter eligibility, and see which elementary school you're supposed to vote in. Next is the NYSBA reference dates. Information was emailed to all board members regarding NYSBA and submitting resolutions and bylaws amendments for consideration in voting the delegates meeting this fall. There are 2 attachments there. One is a resolution kit, and the other are the proposed resolution form. I think if you want to draft a resolution, it's due by July 14th. And so you can read through that information on your own. And last is the Board of Ed policy review. We have a list of policies A through H. that are up for information. Does anybody, including myself, I guess on policy, want to make any comments about this?
I'll just say something real quick about the first one, which is the policy that we've talked about a bunch over the last couple months, which is the amendments and revisions to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Education Policy 0105. As you'll see, the new policy has been retitled Anti-Hate and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity in Education, 0105. Just so you know, that when you're reviewing this, the highlights don't necessarily reflect all of the changes, so I would recommend comparing A and B, which is A is the new version, B is the, I guess, current version, or the version we have enacted, just so you can get a better sense of the changes that were made by the policy committee in conjunction with a number of other stakeholders.
Tended to replace A?
A is replacing B.
A is
Yeah.
replacing B, so, but it still has this up for action on 7/5/20. Oh, never mind, that's
That was
old.
last
Got
year.
it, got
Yeah.
it, all right.
No, yeah,
Sorry.
A is up for
Still so
information, B
confusing.
is the current version of
That's why it's there, got it.
Yeah, trying to
0105.
change B to
Yeah.
become A.
Yes.
Got it, thanks.
And so there's a list of other policies there. Thank you, Nate. So we'll move down to, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, moving down to action items, school business, we'll turn this to Andrew.
We have quite a few items. The first is an installment purchase agreement for 850 Chromebooks. This is part of our one-to-one device initiative. This is planned as part of our long-term plan. This would be 850 Chromebooks for incoming 5th and 9th graders.
Nate, second Kelly. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. The next item is a contract for transportation service for 2 families under McKinney-Vento. We advertise for bids and recommend awarding it to Raja Group for the private transportation contracts.
Can I have a motion to approve the private transportation contract? Blanca, second Kim. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Passes 8-0.
Thank you. The next is a consulting agreement with Needham Risk Management Resource Group. They provide health, safety, and risk management services. They're contracted on an as-needed basis, and they assist us with things like complex indoor air quality issues like radon testing and remediation.
Can I have a motion to approve the consulting agreement with Needham Risk Management? Katie, second Nate. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. The next is an internship agreement. This would allow Clarkson University students to participate in internship or practicum experiences in the district.
Can I have a motion to approve the internship agreement with Clarkson? Judy, second Nate. I'll abstain. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Passes 7-0 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. The next is an agreement for third-party administrator for tax shelter annuities with US Omni. We had previously awarded this to Benetech. Benetech no longer provides the service. Omni provides a good cost.
Right. Can I have a motion to approve the service agreement with Omni and TSACG? Rebecca, second Katie. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. The next is a resolution for canvassing affidavit ballots for the May 16th bond referendum. In accordance with Ed Law, we must designate the date, time, location, and the Central Board of Inspectors for the purpose of canvassing affidavit ballots. This is a paper ballot filed by a voter when he or she cannot be confirmed as a registered voter eligible to vote in the election. There's a process through which they sign it, and then it's reviewed. If they're deemed to be qualified, it's opened, counted, and added to the official results. If they're deemed not qualified, they're notified of the rejection and the reason. And the results of the election are not certified until the affidavit ballots are counted.
Can I have a motion to approve the resolution to canvass affidavit ballots? Kim, second Judy. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, Neil's mentioned in there.
All right. Next is a slight revision to the property tax report card. Following the board adopting it, we had notification of a slight change to one of our payment in lieu of tax agreements. So there is no change to the tax cap. We are under it, as I outlined earlier. This is just a small update.
Can I have a motion to approve the revised property tax report card? Kelly, second. Nate. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Next is an internal audit agreement for next school year. We've had the agreement with Questar 3 BOCES before to conduct the annual internal audit and are pleased with the experience.
Can I have a motion to approve the internal audit agreement with Questar? Rebecca, second. Judy, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Speaking of internal auditor, the next are corrective action plans that were developed as a result of the internal audit. They went through the audit committee, and they're now before you.
Can I have a motion to approve the internal audit reports? It's A through D. Rebecca, second. Katie, any questions or comments? Want to just thank the audit committee and Andrew for helping us with that, and Rebecca as well with the school lunch piece and trying to make sure that ELL students are also considered when applying for free and reduced lunch. Thank you for advocating for that. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
All right, next are the UPK contracts for the 23-24 school year with All Saints Academy, Christ the King Early Childhood Center, Kids Corner, and St. Madeline and Sophie School.
Can I have a motion to accept the universal pre-K contracts with St. Mads, All Saints Catholic Academy, Christ the King, and Kids Corner? Kim, second. Kelly, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
It passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next is a budget transfer of $11,035 for funds to cover software purchases.
And can I have a motion to approve the general fund transfer? Nate, second. Katie, any other questions or comments? All in favor? Passes 8-0.
Finally, I have a recommendation for approving the donation of a box of glazes from community member Linda Tomasulo.
Can I have a motion to approve or accept the donation of a box of various glazes? Blanca, second. Nate, any questions or comments? Just thank you. All in favor? Passes 8-0. Great, thank you, Andrew. Next, we'll move on to board president action. We have two things here. One, the first one is a set of policies, A through C. Can I have a motion to approve the policies? They are student personal expression, computer resources, and data management, and the regulation that goes with that as well. Kim, second. Kelly, any questions or comments? All in favor? Passes 8-0. Next is the appointment of election workers for May 16th. And here we have a list of the election workers for the budget vote and elections on May 16th. So we have voting machine inspector, chief inspector, assistant inspector, poll worker. There's three lists of poll workers there, and so you can read through the names. Can I have a motion to approve this list of appointing the election workers for May 16th? Nate, second. Judy, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 8-0. Great, next we'll move on to board committee reports. We'll start with audit. Rebecca?
So we last met on the 26th. The fruits of our labors were discussed tonight. Our next meeting isn't scheduled yet.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Next is communications. Nate?
Yes, we met about a week and a half ago, pretty short meeting. We looked at the newsletter that I think Andy referenced. It's going to be the budget newsletter that should be going out shortly. It's a fairly large, trifold, full-color, good-looking presentation of the budget, and also in conjunction with that also spoke about the social media, presentation. Yeah, it's been a long meeting already. Where I hope anybody that's on Facebook or any of our district's social media outlets have seen what they've been called Meet Your School Budget. We've been doing, I should say the district's been doing it. I haven't been doing anything. We've been sending them out every Monday, where you kind of get a sense of so that the community understands where the budget is going. Bus drivers, teachers, 75% of the budget is for the personnel and staff that make this school run, make this district run on a daily basis. And, so everybody gets a sense of what that is. And we saw a couple of them that have gone out. This week was in appreciation of Teacher Appreciation Week, was highlighting the teachers in our district, which are obviously incredibly important. And I can't remember the exact, I know that an SRO one was out there. Bus drivers, I believe, was the first one. And I know there's 3 or 4 more between now. Substitute teachers, 3 or 4 more now between now and 2 weeks, I guess, 2 weeks to the budget. Sorry. It's been a long day. So that's and then we can't remember. I don't think we set up another. Have we set up? We set up another meeting probably. I don't remember what it was.
I don't think we set one. We did work a little bit on the exit poll, and
we
came up with another meeting date. We're sort of the fruits of our labors are going to be tested in 2 weeks.
Yes, our fruits are not
bearing fruit.
Bearing fruit.
I guess the strategy to do it by the different categories of different employees, but I really liked it. I didn't see that before, just because there's so many different employees, and usually when there's pictures, I'm like, I don't know who all these people are.
The credit goes to Patrick Malowski, who coordinates our online social media presence. He had the idea and ran with it, and he's just done a beautiful job, really kept capturing the faces of our community. It's great.
I would advocate for anybody that uses social media, Facebook especially, try to share that out. Obviously, anything on social media is only good as far as it goes, and if it stops with you, it doesn't go anywhere. So please share it out so that the community that may not pay too much attention to what goes on in the school budget gets a little more understanding of what that money's going to.
Great. So that was communications, and then policy. Nate.
You could have given me a little break here. So policy, obviously you just saw we had a meeting last week or a couple weeks ago, I'm sorry, where we kind of finalized the current draft of the revised now anti-hate and DEI policy 0105. You saw that today up for information. There are other aspects to this process, primarily there is a definition section 0105E, I believe it is, that we will review at our next meeting, and that is also an extensive revision of the definitions, because obviously you add more terms, you add more stuff, you need to have more definitions. So that policy hopefully will be up for information at our next meeting. We also discussed the fact that there's another aspect to it, which is the regulations. There's a lot of moving parts on the regulations for this policy, not the least of which is the equity plans and the plans that the equity teams have put together. And we decided that, we don't want to negate something that the teams have come up with. We don't want to step on something they've come up with. So we want to see what they have for us, and then we will incorporate that into a revised regulation that will probably get to after the change after July 1st. I would anticipate we'll start looking at regulations, but the policy and the definitions that go along with the policy will certainly be up for information and vote prior to graduation, which was kind of our goal when we started this process. We also discussed, we've been discussing some revised pricing for turf field usage. That's still under, we're waiting for feedback from stakeholders. Is that like the political way to say we're waiting for information? There we go. We also did discuss at the request of some stakeholders revisiting or reviewing the current student dress code, especially as such relates to student athletes. It was a matter of discussion. It was brought up by some community members. We are going to review it. It's not something that anybody is against reviewing. We just want to make sure we have all the information. We want to get feedback from coaches and staff before we make any changes that may be difficult to implement or may not be reflective of what we want them to be reflective of. I think that's an accurate rendition of where we were with it. And we will meet, and this is for all the board members that are reviewing the new 0105 policy. We ask that if you could do so in short order, give us any comments or feedback, because we are going to meet on the 18th. And at the extent we need to make some revisions for another review for info, we'd like to do it at that time. So we would ask that you know, if you want to review it and if you want to provide comments, you do so prior to the 18th, before our next meeting. May 18th is the next policy meeting.
Policy meeting, that's what I mean.
Assuming, well, now we're going to have it now because of the definition. We're going to have a meeting. Originally, it was going to be
You know
tentative.
what time? I don't know if I can make it, that's why.
You'll be there. It's 4 o'clock. Thursday. It's 4 o'clock on Thursday, the 18th.
Okay,
Tentatively, we can revise that.
I'll try to make that work. Okay, thank
All
you.
right. I don't even know if I can make it.
Next is business practices. Judy?
We met on the same day we took the BOCES vote, which I think was April 19th. We met at 7 in the morning with representatives of the firefighter volunteers who are looking for a 10% exemption from school taxes. But it doesn't affect next year's taxes, and because we knew this was going to be a long meeting, we will wait until the next Board of Education meeting to discuss it as a board and see what we want to do.
Great, thank you, Judy. And last, DEI, Rebecca?
We met on April 19th as well. The Student Voice Subcommittee discussed preparation for the anti-hate rally, which Katie just pointed out is scheduled for May 26th at 3 p.m. 3:30 p.m. The Communications Subcommittee discussed that the calendar of cultural observances on the district website has been updated through the end of the year. We discussed that we solicited letters of interest from parents, staff, and students for the open positions for a 2-year term on the DEI subcommittee, or the DEI committee. The deadline's now passed for those letter submissions, but the board is in the process of reviewing and selecting the people for the future. Mr. Pinchonette had a lot of updates about DEI in action across the district, including talking about the recent cultural fair that was held just before the April break. He also shared that Brandon Keeley, the co-author of American Boys, recently visited the 10th grade ELA students. And he also showed a showcase of student-generated, culturally responsive portraits that were really quite amazing. I don't know if they're available on the website or anything, but they were quite good. It might be something worth sharing. There was also a discussion that the district's equity action plans will be shared at the May 23rd BOE meeting. The next meeting of DEI is the day before that, May 22nd.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Those are all the committees. We'll go on to public comment number 2. Linda, is anybody else signed up? Nope, okay, thank you. And last but not least, board issues, ideas, and sharing. Blanca?
I have a question for Rachel, 2 questions. One, for the Seal of Biliteracy, I remember something about a community member can serve as a role of advisor, and I'm actually looking at that PowerPoint. I've actually been approached by a few community members, so where should I be steering them?
I would direct the community members to Marcia
Okay. Okay. One of those community members is actually a teacher at a local school district and plays the role of what I think Miss Roush will be taking on here, and thought she could be of assistance. She's also a Guilderland parent. Then additionally, my question to you is AP exams. Does the district pick those dates, or are those state?
No.
Those are state?
Those are national dates.
National dates. Final exam. So I had a few students, one just last night, who feel that perhaps they're clumped together and perhaps there's no communication between teachers. And so I just wonder, is there communication as to, like, do teachers know that there are AP exams? And so
Yeah.
are we taking any steps to sort of make that a little easier perhaps for our students?
So I think I'm unclear about your question. Are you saying that there's there's school level assessments
Yes,
that
there
are
are
the
final
same time.
exams, cumulative, final exams that encompass the entire year, that are in some instances the day before, the same day as the AP exams. And so I just wonder, are we as a district making any efforts to avoid that?
So, I know that Mr. Wolf, who coordinates AP testing, does publish a schedule ahead of time. I think don't quote me on this, I think it's about 2 weeks ahead of time. I know that I did receive it. If there are specific concerns, I'd love to talk to you later so that we can try to make sure that we spread those things out a little bit. But,
Great,
yeah.
thanks.
Any other issues, ideas, and sharing? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Katie, second Rebecca, all in favor? Aye. Passes 8-0. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Do your self-evaluation.